Cape Verde is reeling from catastrophic flooding that has left a nation in crisis. At least 9 people are dead, and 1,500 have been forced from their homes after Tropical Storm Erin unleashed 193 millimeters of rain in just 5 hours, a staggering amount that far exceeds São Vicente's entire annual average. The government has declared a state of emergency, but the question remains, how did this small Atlantic island nation...
Disaster has struck Cape Verde, and one of its islands is reeling from deadly floods. At least 8 people have been killed after heavy flooding hit São Vicente Island, overwhelming emergency services and cutting off key roads. Officials say the disaster unfolded quickly after torrential rains pounded the island on Monday morning. Roads were swamped, vehicles were swept away, and some people were carried off by the powerful currents. Municipal Councilor José Carlos de Luz told state media that 7 people died in the floods and another was electrocuted.
Become the victim of such devastating weather. The scenes from São Vicente Island paint a devastating picture. Emergency services have been overwhelmed as torrential rains swept away vehicles and people in the early morning darkness. Roads have been cut off, bridges destroyed, and entire communities isolated. What makes this tragedy even more heartbreaking is that among the victims were 4 children. Their lives cut short by waters that rose too fast for anyone to predict or escape. To understand what happened in Cape Verde, we need to look at where these islands sit in one of the world's most active hurricane breeding grounds. Cape Verde, officially known as Cabo Verde, is an archipelago of 10 volcanic islands located about 385 miles off the west coast of Africa. These islands sit directly in the path of what meteorologists call the main development region, the Atlantic corridor.
Storm of the season. This storm generated deadly flooding as it passed through the Cabo Verde Islands and is now forecast to become the Atlantic's first hurricane of the season. The National Hurricane Center forecast shows gradual strengthening this week, potentially reaching major hurricane status somewhere north of the Caribbean. We'll check in with Fox Weather hurricane specialist Brian Norcross for the latest. Just got the new update in from the NHC. We'll get you updated on the second advisory now for Tropical Storm Erin. And tropical downpours in Florida generated some problems over the weekend. Heavy rains swamped Pinellas County. Drivers in St. Pete Beach and Madeira Beach had to navigate flooded roads as others had to abandon their cars entirely as floodwaters rose. The flood threat remains today across parts of Florida up through the Carolinas. Plus, as August rolls on, summer heat making a strong comeback to the East Coast. Boston will be baking as record high temperatures will be threatened across New England. That's today and tomorrow. And the bad news is much of this heat will stick around through most of the month. August is August again until further notice. Prepare accordingly. I will show you that steamy forecast. It's all right now.
Where many of the most powerful hurricanes are born. The formation of Tropical Storm Erin marks the 5th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, and meteorologists are already warning that this storm could become the season's first hurricane. The National Hurricane Center has begun issuing regular advisories, noting that the storm bypassed the tropical depression stage entirely, jumping straight from an invest system to tropical storm status. An unusual development that speaks to the favorable conditions for storm formation in the region. The islands have always experienced seasonal rains.
Residents have been displaced. To understand just how extreme this was, São Vicente usually gets 116 millimeters of rain in an entire year. But on Monday, a staggering 193 millimeters fell in just 5 hours. That's nearly double the yearly average in a single morning, according to the island's Meteorology Institute.
But what happened on Monday, August 12th, was unprecedented. São Vicente recorded 192.3 millimeters of rain in just 5 hours between midnight and dawn local time, according to the National Institute of Meteorology and Geophysics. To put this in perspective, São Vicente usually records 116 millimeters of rain in an entire year. In those 5 devastating hours, the island received nearly double its annual rainfall, a deluge that no infrastructure could withstand. Esther Brito from the country's Meteorology Institute told Reuters that the weather conditions were uncommon, calling it a rare situation, because what was recorded is above their 30-year climatologist average. The meteorologist revealed a critical infrastructure gap that may have contributed to the disaster's severity. The country did not have the radar equipment required to forecast the extent of the rains. The human cost has been devastating. The resulting flash floods killed at least 9 people, including 4 children, with 5 people still missing and 1,500 displaced. 7 people drowned in the floods while 1 person was electrocuted, according to Regional Civil Protection Counselor José Carlos de Luz. Interior Minister Paulo Rocha described the night as marked by panic and despair, while Deputy Prime Minister Olavo Correa told the BBC the floods were catastrophic. Alveno Yali, a community organizer in São Vicente, the worst affected island, described the situation as an incredible meant of heavy rains, strong winds, and flash floods, resulting in significant material losses. The infrastructure damage has been severe and widespread. Roads, homes, and vehicles have been severely damaged, while floodwaters inundated residential areas, damaged commercial buildings, and blocked roads with debris and fallen trees, stranding vehicles. Power outages affected large parts of the island, leaving communities in darkness as they struggled to respond to the crisis. The storm responsible for this devastation was Tropical Storm Erin, which formed just west of the Cabo Verde Islands on Monday morning. The flooding began during the early hours of August 11th as outer rain bands from Tropical Storm Erin swept across the northern islands, with Erin forming later that day about 450 km west and northwest of the Cabo Verde. What makes this storm particularly concerning for the broader Atlantic region is its potential for future development. The storm is moving away from the Cabo Verde Islands and could reach hurricane strength by late Thursday. Conditions are expected to improve beginning Thursday, allowing Erin to strengthen, possibly reaching hurricane status within 48 hours, and even becoming a major hurricane by the weekend. As Erin continues its journey across the Atlantic
this morning and spreads across the basin, you can easily distinguish where that low has been.
Pretty compact, dealing with a little bit of shear as the storm development, the showers and storms that we've seen on visible, displaced from the center just a little to the west, but overall looking pretty good. Cabo Verde Islands, they were hit with some heavy rain and some gusty weather. Listen, as this thing emerged off Africa, I think if you were watching it over the weekend, it had that spin. You already could see that this was a broad circulation. So for it technically to now be a tropical storm, the NHC has noted that this thing is closed off, and we are getting this thing to organize and even strengthen some. Because remember, a tropical storm has to have winds of at least 39 miles an hour. 40 miles an hour would denote this thing. So who knows how it'll be labeled at 11 o'clock Eastern, but we can assume around there.
Yeah, and I think not much changes in the overall forecast, right? We know the same things we knew 20 minutes ago. We're just not calling it Invest 97L.
Yeah.
So for that purpose, let's talk about where it's going. You know, for Saharan dust, for it to be
potentially threatening other communities in the Atlantic basin, meteorologists are closely monitoring its development. The storm currently shows a compact circulation with wind shear displacing showers and storms slightly west of its center. Despite temporarily stalling due to cooler waters, forecasters expect the storm to enter more favorable conditions with water temperatures in the mid-80s to near 90 degrees Fahrenheit, conditions that could support rapid intensification. The timing of Erin's formation is also significant. Over the period 1990-2020, the average formation date of the Atlantic's 5th tropical storm of the year was August 22nd, so the Atlantic is running a bit on the high side in terms of named storm production. The average formation date of the first Atlantic hurricane is August 11th, making Erin's development right on schedule for what could become the season's first hurricane. Tropical Storm Erin became the 5th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season and the 2nd to form this month. The Cape Verdean government's response has been swift, but highlights the scale of the challenge. Cape Verde has declared a state of emergency on the islands of São Vicente and Santo Antão, which activates crisis funds and urgent infrastructure repairs. The government declared a state of disaster for São Vicente and the neighboring island of Santo Antão. Rescue teams are desperately searching for missing people, but the operation is complicated by the extensive damage to transportation infrastructure. The emergency response has been hampered by the very conditions that created the disaster: blocked roads, damaged bridges, and power outages that have isolated communities across the affected islands. Search and rescue operations continue for those still missing, with teams working against time and challenging conditions to locate survivors. What's remarkable about this disaster is how it has mobilized the Cape Verdean diaspora worldwide. The Cape Verdean diaspora, especially in France, Luxembourg, Portugal, and the US, have launched urgent crowdfunding campaigns, with tens of thousands of euros already raised to buy food, water, hygiene products, and emergency supplies. Andrea Levy, president of Hello Cabo Verde in France, told the BBC that the entire diaspora was mobilized and they plan to deliver aid directly. This international response reflects the unique position of Cape Verde, whose population of about 550,000 is dwarfed by an estimated 700,000 to 1 million Cape Verdeans living abroad. The diaspora's economic contributions are crucial for the islands, and their rapid mobilization in this crisis demonstrates the strong cultural and family ties that bind this scattered community. The meteorological factors that created this disaster reveal broader concerns about climate change and extreme weather in the Atlantic. Sea surface temperatures are much warmer than normal, not quite as warm as the record levels reached in 2023 and 2024, but still far warmer than they'd be in a world that wasn't heating up due to fossil fuel pollution. These warmer waters provide more energy for tropical systems, potentially making storms more intense and rainfall events more extreme. Cape Verde's geographic position makes it particularly vulnerable to these changes. The islands sit in the heart of what's known as Hurricane Alley, where atmospheric conditions frequently combine to create tropical disturbances. As ocean temperatures rise and atmospheric patterns shift due to climate change, islands like Cape Verde may face more frequent and severe weather events. The infrastructure challenges revealed by this disaster are particularly concerning for small island developing states like Cape Verde. The country's lack of radar equipment required to forecast the extent of the rains highlights how resource constraints can leave vulnerable populations at greater risk. Early warning systems, which are crucial for disaster preparedness, require significant investment in technology and training that many developing nations struggle to afford. Looking ahead, Cape Verde's meteorological service warned that additional showers and thunderstorms could trigger localized flooding in already saturated areas. This ongoing threat means that recovery efforts must be balanced with continued vigilance for additional weather hazards. Meanwhile, as Tropical Storm Erin moves westward across the Atlantic,
intensity is very hard for computer models to nail, especially considering we're at the beginning of the season. So we have a pocket of extremely warm water that is north of the islands to the east of Florida, and that is untapped territory. So although right now some of the max intensity forecasts are pumping out a Cat 3, I do want to be honest that it could be stronger than that given the water temperatures. I mean, look at that, 86 degrees. Yeah. The Bahamas has temperatures close to the 90s. So it is worth watching very closely because I do think that Category 3 is probably a generous low-end ball when it comes to intensity on this.
Yeah, of course, and the E-name typically happens August 29th. Here we are dealing with the E-name right now. By the way, Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Brian Norcross, he's going to weigh in this morning at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on Weather Command.
Interested to hear his thoughts.
I know, it's so true, and he's always great. He's our weather expert. It's been around.
Everyone along the eastern seaboard needs to watch this storm closely. Current forecast models show the storm potentially reaching Category 3 hurricane strength, with water temperatures supporting rapid intensification. While most models suggest the storm will curve north and away from the U.S. coast, the uncertainty in long-term tracking means communities from the Caribbean to the eastern United States must remain vigilant. The recovery phase will be massive and costly for Cape Verde's economy. The islands depend heavily on tourism, fishing, and remittances from the diaspora. Infrastructure damage from flooding can take months or years to fully repair, particularly for a small island nation with limited resources. The damage to roads, bridges, homes, and businesses will require substantial investment at a time when the government's finances are already strained. For the international community, Cape Verde's disaster serves as a reminder of how climate change disproportionately affects small island states. These nations contribute minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions, but often bear the brunt of climate change impacts, from sea level rise to increasingly intense storms and flooding events. The story of Tropical Storm Erin and its impact on Cape Verde is also a preview of what may be coming for the rest of the Atlantic hurricane season. August is when the tropics usually come alive, with the busiest stretch of the season typically spanning from mid-August to mid-October. Forecasts indicate unusually strong agreement among forecast models that Erin will likely intensify this week into a major hurricane by the weekend, with the National Hurricane Center's initial outlook calling for gradual intensification with hurricane strength by Wednesday and Category 3 status by Saturday. As Cape Verde begins the long process of recovery, the international community must recognize that this disaster is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of climate change impacts on vulnerable island nations. The rapid response of the Cape Verdean diaspora shows what's possible when communities mobilize, but it also highlights the need for more systematic international support for climate adaptation and disaster preparedness in small island developing states. The courage and resilience of the Cape Verdean people in facing this crisis is evident, but they shouldn't have to face such challenges alone. As Tropical Storm Erin continues its journey across the Atlantic, potentially threatening other communities, Cape Verde's experience serves as both a warning and a call to action for better preparedness, stronger international cooperation, and more urgent action on climate change. The images coming out of Cape Verde, flooded streets, damaged homes, families evacuating, are a stark reminder that climate change is not a future threat, but a present reality. For the families who lost loved ones, for the 1,500 people displaced from their homes, and for a nation working to rebuild, this disaster will have lasting impacts that extend far beyond the 5 hours when the rain fell. Their story deserves our attention, our support, and our commitment to preventing such tragedies in the future.